I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show. Today on the James Altucher Show.
I'm doing an experiment. It's called I Will Make You a Millionaire. The idea is I take 10 or 12 completely random people, and I use the specific techniques in my recent book, Skip the Line, and within 6 to 12 months, my goal is to make them $1 million or put them on the path towards making $1 million. I started out with a couple people. I'm adding people one at a time, and a lot of people have been very nice and sent me reviews of Skip the Line and explained why they should participate in this. I encourage people to buy Skip the Line because it's all these techniques. But anyway, I've started working with a couple of people, and I've been recording on Zoom all the sessions, and I wanted to share this recording from just yesterday with James Quandahl, who's one of the first 2 people I picked to be in this I Will Make You a Millionaire program. Again, it's not going to be like today he makes $1 million, but we're going over the techniques bit by bit each time of how to come up with good ideas, how to decide something's a good idea, how to execute on things depending on which direction he's going. Everybody needs to build different skills, and so we work on that. And I just show him how I would think about things. And so even if at first it doesn't seem like, oh, well, he's not recommending a stock that'll make $1 million. It's the mindset and the skills to make $1 million that come first. But with James, his first idea list was some books he could write on a topic he's interested in. And that could, of course, lead to other things in what I call the spoken will approach on Skip the Line. But there's some very interesting things that happen in this session that you're about to listen to. And I want to share these because then, even though I'm only picking, I only have the resources or time to pick like 10 or 12 people, everybody could potentially learn from these sessions and these ideas. And I'll share the other person who, as well in a week, who has a completely different set of things he's working on that could very quickly make him a millionaire. James also has some ideas that could very quickly make him a millionaire, but you'll see that I build the foundation first. And we talk about it's building a foundation that gets you to make millions over and over again. So this is an example session this was my second session with James Quandahl. And again, I'm using specifically the techniques that I write about in Skip the Line. So here's I Will Make You a Millionaire. Listen to this, and then I would love to hear your advice on the things you would like to hear about this, or maybe the skill sets that you would like to learn about, and I will focus on those. So you could tweet that at jaltucher or write me at altucher@gmail.com. Let me know. Thanks very much. And here's James Quandahl's I Will Make You a Millionaire. So how are things going?
Things are going well. I loved what we did in our last call.
Yeah, that was fun. It was a unique style for me too.
I mean, it was trial by fire.
Yeah,
it was like, all right, you want to learn interviewing skills? All right, we're going to do it right now.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, no, it was, I had just seen the idea, a similar idea by Noah Kagan. And so as I do, I like to steal ideas, but giving credit where credit is due and, try it in a different way. It's okay to steal a premise, maybe not the exact idea, but it's okay to steal a premise, I feel. And I think it worked really well. And I think it was instructive, not only for me and for you, but then for the listeners when we released it as a podcast. Did you get any unusual feedback?
Nothing unusual. I think the best compliment was someone wrote on Twitter and said, hey, it was really cool to just hear you learning during the podcast, like in live progression. Because you just don't really hear that very often. You hear how people put a lot of work in and they put a lot of effort in, and then 3 years later, they're a good podcaster or whatever. But you don't get to hear the wheels actually spinning and it happening real time. So yeah, I thought that was cool.
Yeah, cool. So let me bring up your notes. How's we have to start thinking now, what's the next step? So that like last one was more let's call it informative and interesting, and gave you some practice. And so one of the spokes that you're looking at. Now we got to start narrowing it down about what you want to do next.
Just last week, I basically mimicked the same conversations that we had with Dave and Bill, and I got two friends on Zoom, and I interviewed them on their spiritual disciplines as entrepreneurs. And this time, unlike with Bill and Dave, I had some questions written out and I had some ideas of where I wanted to take it. And I said, you know what, I'm going to try and do this in 10 minutes and see if I can just like provide value, release it as sound bites, and then use it in the book and just see if I can just get hundreds of entrepreneurs maybe and ask them about their questions and then just release it as a daily podcast or whatever. And before that experiment that we did on the call, I would have just talked that to death with all my friends, all my family. I would have wrote a whole bunch of plans. I would have written it all down, and I would have talked myself out of it. And instead, I was just like, forget it. I'm just going to do an experiment. And then I just put it on the calendar, and then I did those calls, and I learned more about podcasting in those two calls than I have in the last 2 years talking about launching a podcast. Like, seriously.
That's great.
And I improved. And do you know what I realized? 10 minutes is not for me. That's not my jam. Like, I need more time. I want to get to know the person. I want to actually hear the story. I want to get really in depth. And if one conversation was awesome and I loved it, but he had another call he had to go to because we only planned for 10 minutes. So we had to stop. And I was like, oh, I could have talked for 40 more minutes about this story that he was sharing. So
no, well, that's the thing is, what we did last time was packed as much as we could in a 5-minute conversation or less even. But the reality is let's say 40 minutes to an hour or more is ideal, but you want to pack that much quality into every 5 minutes of the hour. So that's really the key. I've never done a podcast that's only 10 minutes. I go for like hour, 2 hours, whatever. And, but every 10 minutes people lose interest and you have to figure out new ways to catch their interest. So you have to pack as much as you can into every 10 minutes. And then every 10 minutes, there's a change. People's attention span for podcasts is about 10 minutes. That's why you have to change it up every 9.5 minutes. So where are you at now? So you've got these 4 interviews or you'll do more, you'll do 100 and then take the top 30 or 40 or 50 or whatever you want. And then you'll have this book. Is that the book you think you want to write?
I love the idea of the book. I think it's the perfect combination of taking maybe 15 spiritual practices and then highlighting how to do them. Very tactical, very clear. And then ending each chapter with the story of the entrepreneur that practiced that discipline and how it helped their business. And then maybe even like write a link to their business and like talk about what they do. And it's basically like, it would be a book that's highlighting all these great people and all the things that make them who they are. And I think that's what I learned in the interviews is spiritual disciplines are very personal, and 10 minutes, it takes longer than that to really get to the meat of why they do it and how it shows up in their life.
And by the way, so the interviews we did last time, they were kind of random. Like I saw, they were random in the sense that, for better or for worse, I have 5,000 Facebook friends for some reason. They were online that moment. They were the first ones I came across scrolling down, and the first ones I asked 3 people, and one was busy, and 2 out of the 3 said yes, and those were the 2 we spoke to. But think about it, Dave Kirpin, who we spoke to, his company, which he had just sold, I had learned at that moment, his company was called Likeable. So whatever his spiritual discipline was, probably did lead to his philosophy of the business, and it was an agency called Likeable, because spirituality and likability, there's some vague connection there. And the other one, Bill Glazer, he has his business is called Outstanding Foods, but it's about his dedication since he was a kid to vegan and healthy eating, just not only for health reasons, but for ethical reasons. So spiritual disciplines are strongly related to how people view entrepreneurship. So, and that was just random people we picked, and we saw the direct connections. But what I want to do is let's look at spiritual disciplines for entrepreneur as the wheel. Okay, so we took entrepreneurship, which a million people have written about, and we narrowed it down to the spiritual disciplines for entrepreneurship. And now that's the wheel here. And before we close today, I want to also talk about some of the Amazon ideas, completely unrelated, that you also had. But let's think of what are the spokes of this wheel. So obviously one is a book and another is a podcast. So you could do a podcast about the spiritual disciplines for entrepreneurs. You could do a book, which you're going to do about this. What are some other spokes, just to go through the exercise of how you can make money, or not, but most of these spokes will be probably money related. What are some other spokes?
Different merchandise.
And by the way, these could be bad ideas, good ideas. The key here is just to list spokes.
Yeah, there could be a YouTube channel that just profiles different people in different disciplines, just with real engaging content.
Okay.
There could be like a webinar series that people could go through to actually adopt these in their lives, and then like a playbook that like a companion manual that would go with the book that would basically help them to adopt these habits.
Okay.
There could even be coaching of some kind, like a dedicated coach that would walk with someone and talk through that.
Right. So that coach could initially be you, but then later on be other people.
Yep, exactly.
Mm-hmm. What else? We reached the 7 point, right?
Yeah,
so now the 8, 9, and 10 is always where the brain sweats. So this was the easy 7. Now what's the next 3?
We mentioned a companion manual, but there could be a playbook for entrepreneurs to actually engage in their business, their spiritual disciplines, like actually making these disciplines part of their business plan in some way. Maybe it's part of their performance reviews or their one-on-one process or their onboarding process.
I feel like we're covering that somewhere between the book and the companion manual.
Okay.
I feel like that's in there. We can't cheat on 8, 9, and 10. Not that you were cheating, but we can't. If I really am considerate making an idealist, I have to make sure I didn't already kind of say this.
Yeah, we could create some type of like a mastermind group where, like a retreat or something, where people that were interested could just come and kind of really take a deep dive in the spiritual disciplines and have different experts that would come in and lead each of the different sections.
Yeah, like you could have someone like, let's say a Jeff Immelt, who was the CEO of GE, speak to such a group, or a Ken Langone, who started Home Depot and has a strong
Yeah.
spiritual practice.
We could have Dave Ramsey talk about generosity and the legacy journey. And
yeah, no, that's a good idea. And also, by the way, you could tell their stories also in the book. So your book could be composed of interviews you do with small entrepreneurs, but also stories of either historical figures or, famous, does Elon Musk have a spiritual discipline? Does Larry Page, famous people or actually Steve Jobs is a great example. He was a very much interested in Zen Buddhism and meditated every day. And so, and, even then sadly, when he was sick, he tried to do spiritual or holistic methods first to help himself, but his sickness had gone too far. And so he needed more drastic help. But, so I would interweave historical or famous stories with the stories that you unravel among your network. But then, yes, the mastermind group is kind of an outgrowth of that, a mixture of bringing in the people who are interested in this with, known experts. Okay, so what do we have now? 8. I'll throw one out there for you though, is speaking engagements. So, if the book does well or the podcast does well, if any one of these, or if the YouTube channel does well, you will be ripe for, let's say, a TEDx talk. The TEDx talk could launch you into a speaking engagement career where you have story after story about the spiritual disciplines of entrepreneurs. Companies have these retreats. They bring in speakers and they want to inspire and elevate the motivation and work ethic of their employees. They might want someone who talks about, morning disciplines for entrepreneurs. But I'm almost wondering if that's included in the book or companion.
Yeah, it probably is.
So I don't like that. Let's just keep it written there. But I don't think it qualifies as number 10 on the idea list. But that's okay. So speaking gigs is certainly a monetization possibility. Webinar, so what's a 10th thing?
I wonder if this is a cheat from one of the other ones, but what about entrepreneurship program for churches to actually help the churches to foster business, create businesses within them? I was kind of thinking the Financial Peace University that Dave Ramsey does, where they basically have people facilitate these classes at churches to help the people in the church build better money habits. And that helps the people in their personal lives. And it also helps the church, because generally, if you're going to have better money habits, you're going to tithe more and give more to the church.
So let me just add a little to that, because I think that's interesting. So perhaps there's course, not a book, but a course, something a little bit more higher end, 100 unique ways church could make more money. But it starts off with, the disciplines and habits of people who make money, and then 100 specific ideas for how churches can increase their revenue streams. What do you think of that?
Yeah.
Because I feel like if I'm a priest at a church and I'm a little nervous about, is my church going to survive? And not necessarily a priest, could be a minister, could be some other type of. It could be that I'm like any other businessman or someone who leads an organization. I want to figure out how to make money other than a muffin sale or passing the hat around. So, maybe that is 100 unique ideas for how religious ministry can make more money. So,
yeah, and there's websites that pastors will go to. I think one's called Sermon Notes, where they'll actually go and purchase or get different sermon series from, or inspiration for sermon series. And I think that the church needs to talk more about entrepreneurship and values-based business leadership. And the church needs to practice more spiritual disciplines too. I mean, it's needed in both ends.
All right. So I like this. And, some of these ideas could be included with each other. So for instance, the morning and evening disciplines for entrepreneurs, which is not technically on the list, that could be, the final chapter of the book. When a book that's like this, that's called The Spiritual Disciplines for Entrepreneurship, can go vertically and horizontally, meaning first you go horizontal and you interview different entrepreneurs with their spiritual disciplines. But then you go vertical, which is Okay, here's a summary of what they all do in the morning. Here's what the summary of what they all do in the evening. Here's a summary of how they hire people or how they manage, their philosophy of managing. So you kind of like cross the concept in different ways. And that could be like the second half of the book. And and that could also the companion manual I see, which is one of the ideas here, I see could be potentially included in the book. Like the thing about a book is I always think to myself, I just want to throw everything I can in the book because I want the book to be successful.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, when it's successful, you're not going to do a companion manual if it's not successful because there's no point. So, but if it's successful, then you start thinking of what the companion manual looks like. But first, throw everything you can into the book itself. Now, by the way, a book doesn't make a lot of money, pretty much no matter what, unless you're lucky. But these other things like speaking gigs or mastermind group or a course for 100 unique ideas for religious ministries to make more money, those are higher end ways to make money. So you could sell the course for several $100s and ideally sell it to 1,000 religious ministries. Or who knows? We're still not judging whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. Speaking gigs, once you get going, like someone like Dave Ramsey or even people who have worked with him before, like John Acuff, they make, Dave Ramsey himself probably makes between 50 and 100,000 per speaking gig. Coaching could, of course, depending on who you're coaching, could of course make a lot of money. And it's not like the typical life coach thing. You wrote a book, Spiritual Disciplines for Entrepreneurs. So you're bringing in this knowledge that you have that's a little bit more of expertise and professional than just a random, life coach.
So does the book need to be, by standard norms, a bestseller to be able to then snowball into all of this?
No, the book, at the lowest level, the book just separates you from someone who's offering the same service or skill, but hasn't written a book. So of course, if people are picking someone for a speaking gig and they have two choices, you and someone exactly like you who hasn't written a book, then they choose you 100% of the time. So the book is like, oh, I have a business card, but the other guy doesn't, so choose me. And so that's why they choose you. So the book does not have to be a bestseller at all. Would it be great if it's a bestseller? Of course. All these other opportunities become bigger if the book's a bestseller, but it's not a requirement. But I would still throw everything into the book. Same thing with the podcast. Like, podcast doesn't have to be a bestseller. I mean, it doesn't have to be a number one podcast. Maybe just 1,000 people an episode listen to it, but it's the 1,000 you want to listen to it. And if the podcast is good enough, spreads through word of mouth or whatever. Merchandise, not as much a fan of that. YouTube channel, it's good. You could put the podcast, you could do video for each of the podcasts and put it on your YouTube channel. Webinar, I'm not sure people will sign up for a webinar, but I don't know. Companion manual, we discussed. I throw everything into the book at first. All the exercises, all the disciplines, everything you could think of, I would throw into the book. Because again, if the book doesn't do well, there's no companion manual anyway. So you might as well throw everything you can and give it your best shot in the book itself.
Yep.
Mastermind group, that's down the road. But yeah, it's a possibility. It's certainly a spoke. It could happen, and some masterminds make money, some don't. Speaking gigs is an income, not a wealth strategy. But if you do enough speaking gigs, if you're on the road 30 or 40 weeks a year doing speaking gigs, you could start to generate wealth. And then the 100 unique ideas for religious ministries to make more money, I would do that as a one-off, much higher end course. Like, not sell for $20 like a book, but sell for like $200-$300 or more. And so, or even $1,000. But for people who respond, the first 100 ministries that respond first, they get a discount or whatever.
Yep.
I'll tell you a story. So one time I had a friend who went broke and he needed to make some money. And he had a huge email list. Like, over the years, this is before email lists were what they are today. Like, over the years, people who had emailed him, he had just kept the emails around in one big list. There wasn't as much regulation around it. and he was going to write a book. I think it was 100 stock. He was a financial writer. He was going to write a book, 100 stocks for the biotech revolution, something like that. I'm making it up a little bit, but because I don't want to have him identified. And he was going to sell it as a book to his list for $30, maybe even less, because it would have been a PDF. And I'm like, no, that's not a good idea. If a biotech stock works, and by the way, it wasn't biotech, it was another area similar. But if a biotech stock works, it's going to go up 100x. Not, it's not just a good biotech stock. It's 100x. It's a stock with a potential 10,000% return. So I said, why don't you call this, 100 stocks that could go up 100 times and sell for $1,000, not $20. And he had 30,000 people on his email list. So he did that. He did a title that I suggested. He did same content, but just different title. He changed the price like I suggested, because also it's not a BS price. It's, if you're giving someone a stock that they're going to put $1,000 in, which is not a lot of amount of money people are going to put in a stock, and it goes up 100 times and they make $100,000, they'd be happy to pay $1,000 for an online thing that, one-off thing that gives them that. So 1% of the 30,000, which is like what, 300 people? Yeah, bought it.
Wow.
And he went from broke to $300,000 overnight, like within a couple of weeks, dead broke. And he bought a house with the money. He was so confident and happy. He got married, and because he had more confidence, and he wasn't living in his parents' basement anymore. And at the time, he was living in like North Dakota or Montana, someplace like that, where Jay is eventually going to live. And so his living expenses weren't that great. And so $300,000 gave him enough runway, a year or two or more of runway, that he started a full business, and he did more of these, and made millions. So all it takes is like one thing like that. And so that's what I'm saying is, the 100 unique ideas for religious ministries to make more money. This is very valuable to a religious ministry and something they really need. They would spend, if you are known because you did the spiritual disciplines for entrepreneurship, because you have speaking gigs, whatever, because you have a podcast, and you can potentially connect them up to entrepreneurs if they need to. They'd spend $200 or $300. They might not spend $1,000, but they'd spend $200, and you'd have to experiment with pricing, and there's ways to do that. Now, another thing is the book itself. I think there's one aspect is that there's the spiritual disciplines for entrepreneurs, for entrepreneurship. But I would also go a little deeper on what it is they're actually doing. So we spoke to Bill Glazer last week. He has a food company, makes vegan snacks. So I'd want to know tactically also, how do you make a company that goes from recipes to packaging to getting on the shelf space of stores? Or if someone has a drop shipping company in Amazon, I want to know the tactics, the techniques for how do you make a company that buys from China and then drop ships directly to a customer in the US through a store on Amazon. So I'd want to know the specific steps 1 through 10 of doing that. So that's just something to consider for the book, so that it goes from the spiritual, which people don't view conceptually as practical, to the very practical. So if someone recommends the book and another person's like, that sounds great, but I need something really practical, their friend who's recommending it can say, no, believe me, it's super practical also.
Yeah, because not only does it talk about 15 spiritual disciplines, but then it also talks about 15 businesses and the tactical steps of those businesses.
Right, like how someone can start from scratch and start that business. So just like I told you about my friend who sold the book for $1,000 and how he did it, it's the same thing, could be across 15 different business models.
Yeah, it'd sort of be like the Side Hustle Fridays, where it's basically, here's the action steps to go launch the business, and then here's it's connecting the spiritual disciplines, and then like an entrepreneur's guidebook to starting a company.
Yeah. So, and then, by the way, then, so here's how I see the book. but again, it's up to you. But I like thinking structurally like this. So there's the spiritual disciplines of entrepreneurs. So there's entrepreneurs you call in your network, or maybe that you reach out to and who are willing to talk to. Maybe you don't know them, but you reach out to them and they're willing to talk to you. There's historical stories like, what was Andrew Carnegie's, and Steve Jobs and people like that, spiritual disciplines. There's your story interwoven through this of times when you've had hard times, but spiritual disciplines helped you through them. So you kind of have to, ultimately, when you write a book and you're telling someone else's story, you're really telling your story through the life of that other person. That's even a biography. If I write a biography of George Washington, I'm really telling my story, but through the way I just talk about George Washington. And but in this case, you could interweave your story specifically through the different stories. Then I would also tell stories from the stories about Jesus or Buddha or whoever that kind of exemplify in the original religious documents of these various disciplines how, let's say someone is a strong Christian and they bring that, and they describe how they bring that into their business and how it helped them start their business and so on. You could talk about a story of how Jesus managed his disciples, which he did do. Like a great example of Jesus providing a management principle is when, and we might have talked about this before, but when Simon, the fisherman, wants to follow Jesus, Simon's later Peter, but Simon wants to follow Jesus, but he says to Jesus, "Oh, sorry, first I have to bury my father just died, I have to bury him." And Jesus is walking away, and Jesus said, "Let the dead bury the dead." There's a management lesson in there somewhere. And that could be related to one of the disciplines, hey, we all move forward in life. And, you can't now yet, maybe that's a little almost brutal, him telling, Simon/Peter that, but there's many examples where, you lose a customer. Okay, we lost a customer. What did we learn from it? Move forward. Let the dead bury the dead. We can't shut down the business or for a month because we did this. We got to just keep moving forward. So, and Buddha has examples of this. Like Buddha is a great example of someone who uses spiritual discipline for entrepreneurship. He was an entrepreneur. He had hundreds of monks that lived in the grove with him. But this grove where he had them all live was right in the middle of three different warring kingdoms, one of whom was his relatives. One kingdom was, so how did he live? How did he survive in the middle of a 3-kingdom war where he was related to one of the kingdoms? And that the management stories from that are immense. And by the way, then there's a bibliography of all these things. So, and then of course there's kind of the cross section of all this. Well, what do they all have in common about morning routines? What do they all say about management style and so on? And so there's this kind of cross-section description. And then there's the tactical, the tactics of each entrepreneur, how they built their business and how anybody can start from scratch and build this business.
I would read that book.
Yeah, I would read that book. I would write that book. If you don't write it, I'll write it. Like, that's a great book. And by the way, this holds true. This exact same structure holds true for the podcast.
I have a question about people that do collaborative books. How do you feel about that?
Well, I just did one. I did an audio book with Charlemagne, who is a very popular radio host, and we very much defined where the boundaries were. Like, it was a book, it was an audio book about racism. It was originally going to be called We Have Questions, but then it was called We Got Answers. And basically I had questions, naive questions that someone like me might have to someone who's, from a minority community. And then Charlemagne found all the people for me to interview, intellectuals, leaders, celebrities, and so on, people who had a voice, and I interviewed them. And there was some overlap. Like I found one of the people and he did some of the writing or introductions and things like that. But it worked out very well because we had very clear boundaries and so on. In general, though, I would not do a collaboration on a book like you're describing. This is yours. This is going to be your brand in this particular case. I don't think you need to do a collaboration. If you want to, it's fine, but just you have to make sure the boundaries are very well set.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe when someone says the tactics, you hand it off to someone and say, okay, flesh out these tactics a little further and the resources needed and write that up. And that's one way you divide responsibilities. Like you're going to do the interviews, but I wouldn't do like half the interviews are you, half the interviews are him. That's, you're going to learn from each interview anyway. So you might as well do all of them. But you can do a collaboration if it's more divided up. But I don't think you need to do one for this kind of thing. I needed to do one with the Charlemagne book because it made sense that he would find the people and I would ask the questions.
Yeah.
And again, there was overlap, but there was also clear responsibilities. And then he did more of the marketing because...
Did that project scare you at all?
Oh, yeah. To be honest, I spoke to both my agent and other people in the publishing industry, and nobody wanted me to do the book for lots of reasons. I was working on one thing is I was working on another book, so they didn't want to distract me, but it didn't. The other thing is they were a little nervous because I didn't really fully explain how this would be structured. They were a little nervous that this could backfire on me, that if my questions were too, let's say, naive, maybe people would hate me and there would be publicity on that. And that would take away from publicity on the book they were working with me on, the other book they were working with me on. So, but it's good to get advice, but it's another thing to take it. So you have to sort of decide. Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very, very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply.
I'm reading Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of Art, right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really afraid to do a podcast for 2 years now. I've been talking about doing one. And then we just kind of did it with the last mentorship call. We just got it out of the way. We just asked questions and just just did that.
And by the way, then since we're recording all these videos, that video or really that audio, I became a podcast for me. That's how easy it was for me to generate an episode. And by the way, that was, Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, that was a well-downloaded episode, right?
Yep. It's a pretty good download.
Yeah. So more than the average. So
Well, sure.
you never know. Well, it's always good to play with formats, and even right here, we're writing the format down for like a book,
Mm-hmm.
but the format could change. We could have other ideas. And by the way, just because we made this list, you might not write a book. You might start off with the 100 unique ideas for religious ministries to make money.
Yeah.
While you're working on the podcast and the book. Like, these are spokes, because it's not like a wheel uses one spoke at a time. It needs all the spokes to be a wheel. So, so you'll decide a couple of these to do simultaneously, and some will work out, some you'll finish, some you won't. And you can't, because you're diversifying the approach. And then there's a something I call conspiracy numbers, which is worth noting, which is, let's say you have a specific goal, and ostensibly the specific goal of these meetings that we're having is that you're going to make $1 million fairly quickly. Then we start to look at how many, what I call a conspiracy number is how many things have to conspire for each one of these items to make you a millionaire. And so let's take an example of the book. The book, and let's just assume you're going to self-publish, because then it's ridiculous. Then you have, if you don't self-publish, you have to get an agent. The agent has to set up a bunch of meetings. You have to pitch the book successfully so that one of the publishers likes it. You have to write the book in their time frame, which is going to be a year and a half approximately. And then it's got to be a bestseller. And then your next book might make you money, right? Even if this book's a bestseller, it won't make you that much money. So that's like, I just counted 6 things. There's probably even more. So that's a conspiracy number of 6. 100 unique ideas for religious ministries to make more money, which you're going to sell for, let's say, $1,000. Well, there's 1 million religious ministries in the country. So you just have to, if you make that and it's good, assuming it's good, you have to sell that to 1,000 people to make $1 million. So the conspiracy number is you have to get in front of all the ministries but you could do that through advertising dollars or direct mail or whatever. And, or you can affiliate with someone who has an email list of all religious ministries, and you have to just sell, 1% of 1%, 1/100th of 1% of all the religious ministries out there. You have to sell to that, 1/100th of 1% in order to make $1 million.
Yeah.
And it probably would take you a month to, let's say, make a first draft of this, maybe even faster. So it has a conspiracy number of maybe you have to make the book and you have to get in front of the people, and 1,000 of ministries have to get it. So it's a conspiracy number of 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a much lower conspiracy number to make $1 million than a book. Podcast, very high conspiracy number, because you got to find the people to interview. You got to start the podcast. You've got to build up an audience that's sufficient to advertise. You have to find advertisers, and probably have to do it for a while before your advertising dollars hit $1 million. And on and on. And so you kind of could figure out the conspiracy number for each thing. But it's not just about making $1 million. I think the book kind of adds to all the other activities here to help to make it easier for them to make $1 million. So for instance, for you to get in front of all religious ministries, it helps to say, hey, I wrote this book. And so
yeah, and doing the podcast gives me the time to actually interview and ask these questions that turn into the book.
Yeah.
So they can both be done at the same time.
One other thing I would say about the book, look at your earlier list of books I can write.
Mm-hmm.
So 7 Highly Effective Habits of Christian Leaders, the Billy Graham Bible, 10 titles for lead like Jesus, or basically lead like Jesus, or how would Jesus eat today? These are all important for entrepreneurship. So it might be that the ideas behind these other books become chapters or parts of this book. So again, you want to throw everything you can into this book, as long as it's relevant. Like, you're not going to also have a chapter on, who's going to win the Super Bowl next year, because that wouldn't be relevant. But, certainly there should be a chapter in here, the 7 highly effective habits of spiritual leaders or Christian leaders or whatever. And, certainly one of the resources you draw from might not be only the Bible or texts in Hinduism or Buddhism or Taoism, whatever, but maybe texts from, quotes or stories from the Dalai Lama, or even like Joel Osteen or Billy Graham, like your idea of the Billy Graham Bible and so on. So I would also, as one additional thing to think about in the book, is that I would incorporate what's applicable from your other ideas for books. Then later on, they could become full books. But this is part of the strategy of throw everything you can into the first book, so it's great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think, and then by the way, and you even have a first draft of Lead Like Jesus. I think incorporate that entire first draft, or at least the best parts of it, into this book.
Yeah, those are the titles. Those are 10 ideas of a titles for the Lead Like Jesus type book, which is basically, I've been writing lessons that I learned from my time in retail, managing a team, on my blog for the last couple of years now. And so I already have the first draft. After we had our last call, I took all those blog posts that I thought fit into this and created a little outline, and then grabbed them all and put them in a Word document. So now I have this Word document, first draft of that book, that is, let me pull it up real quick. Right now it's still loading.
So
it's 35,000 words already. And this is just first draft. Like, I haven't even touched it. This is just the articles that I thought would apply to that topic.
And I love this because this is the idea of, which we discussed earlier, which is always a first draft. A great idea for a first off, every book's going to run through, 5 to 50 drafts. So you don't have to worry about anything relating to quality or, production, whatever, on the first draft. But I love the idea of taking every article you've written about a topic and stapling them together. That's your first draft. And it's people don't realize it's so easy to make first draft of a book, particularly if you've been prolific in other ways. Or if you have a podcast, take all the transcripts, edit them a little bit so it's readable, and staple them together. Boom, first draft of a book. And now you're going to rewrite it completely.
Tools of the Titans.
Tools of the Titans, or I wrote a book which I never sold on Amazon, but I sold it on Scribd, which is Think Like a Billionaire. Mm-hmm. That was originally I stapled together the transcripts, and then we did 27 drafts and turned it into a book. But it started out like 7,000 pages as just the stapled together version of all these transcripts. So now I want to talk a little bit about the next. I think you should do all of this and so on and start it. And in particular, I mean, you should pick which ideas you want to start with, but I would start with the book, the podcast, the YouTube channel, and the 100 Unique Ideas for Religious Ministries. The reason I say the book, podcast, and the YouTube channel is because they're all the same thing, right? The podcast is you interviewing people or you telling stories. Like, think about the Bible for a second. Let's look at the leaders in the Bible. So first off, Noah was a leader. He had to convince people, and he kind of failed at it, but he had to convince people to go on his boat, and he had to lead the construction of a huge boat and get all the animals on it and so on. Abraham was a leader. He had to basically start his own, tribe. Certainly Moses was a leader. He led his people out of Egypt, and he had to persuade Pharaoh to let this happen. Joshua was a leader. He had to get people, he had to basically get his people into Israel. And then, and on and on. And then we go into the New Testament. Jesus was a leader. Paul was a leader. Peter was a leader. So there's lots of leaders in the Bible, and people don't normally think of them that way, but these people had to be managers. Moses, when he came down from the mountain and his people were worshiping a golden calf, he had to discipline them so they wouldn't do that anymore. And he had to motivate them so they would stay with him and follow his leadership. So these are hardcore leadership problems that these people had to deal with.
Yeah, and they're life or death. It's not like making widgets and selling widgets. This was their livelihood.
Right. It's not like, Moses would just go over to, back to Egypt and say, well, that didn't work out. Are there any venture capitalists who will fund my next thing? Like, There's no second chance.
No, he was.
So-
If he didn't succeed, he would be stoned.
Right. Yes. Like then there was a danger of that they didn't like him at when because he left them for long enough time. He wasn't getting them to Israel. So
Mhm.
he almost risked that. So I think there's a lot here. Again, book, podcast, YouTube, because those are all the same thing. Oh, and the reason why I was bringing up those stories of like Moses and stuff, your podcast might not, some of your formats might not be you interviewing an entrepreneur, but you simply telling the story of Moses from a leadership perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's okay. It's okay to have multiple formats. So this way some people will like one format, some people will like another. You cater to, but you're still catering to the same type of audience. So some people like one style over another.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing with the YouTube channel.
With really tactical on that for a podcast, for example, and with my blog, would you suggest I keep creating this content under my name and just release it as one kind of evolving project?
Yes.
Okay.
And the reason is that not everybody listens to every podcast episode. Not everyone watches every YouTube show. Not everyone's going to read every chapter in your book. Some people listen to your podcast won't buy your book and vice versa. So I remember there was one point, this is 2005, so 16 years ago, I would write an article for thestreet.com. I would write the same article for the Financial Times, the same article, not even changing a word, for the Wall Street Journal. And I would be a little nervous, like, would one of them be unhappy because I was doing this? In let's say the 2 or 3 years I was doing this, not a single person said a single thing. Like, oh, I read, you wrote this in thestreet.com. You wrote this for Yahoo Finance. Now I'm reading in the Financial Times. Not a single person ever noticed. Why? Because not everybody read every article, and not everybody who read the Financial Times read the Wall Street Journal, and so on. So
That makes sense.
The overlap is minimal, which is actually how you build then a bigger audience, because you can use the same content to hit different people. And it's not like you're plagiarizing yourself. It's fine. And the only people who might have been upset about it were the people running these companies. But again, they weren't, because they didn't even read the other journals or magazines, and nobody complained to them. So it actually worked out well for them that I took my best content and used it for them, even though I had used it somewhere else. It worked out for the readers. It worked out for me. So it's the same thing, same principle here.
And were you sharing any of that on your personal branded outlets at that time?
Yeah, not at that time, but later I wrote about that.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I didn't really have a personal outlet. I was just writing for these places. So,
and in my shoes right now, I just added to our list of 10, like when you talked about other magazines and outlets and newspapers, do you think that these stories could be something that I could pitch to these magazines and business magazines and
absolutely, yeah. Every single let's put that on the list of ideas, is that you should be pitching each thing to other either magazines or websites. How many decently trafficked, spiritually related websites are there? Thousands. And guess what? They are all 100% of them are looking for quality content. There's no one's going to say no because we have too much content.
Yeah. I would love to write for them. That would be great.
Yeah. So you should pitch each one. Like if you do, for instance, let's say you do a podcast with somebody about, they started a social media agency, and you get their spiritual disciplines and you get their tactics. You write that up as a 1,000-word article, maybe, and you pitch it to 100 different websites or 10 different websites and see who takes it. And by the way, publish it in all 10 if you can.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I like this idea. I like this whole concept, and this coincides with your interests of spiritual thought and spiritual disciplines, and it combines your interest with this and entrepreneurship. I think it remains to be seen whether this is a path to $1 million. I think it could be, and particularly some of these ideas that we've written down, and you'll have more ideas as time goes on and as you work on this. Could be the case that some of the entrepreneurs you interview give you some ideas or make you think of some ideas that could turn into $1 million. Like another great thing, an ancillary benefit of a podcast is the network you build through the podcast. So, that network, your network, there's a saying, your network is your net worth. So as you build out your network of, very focused, disciplined entrepreneurs, that's going to, give you more opportunities and ideas to make money. But I do think also simultaneously, you have another important wheel here, which is your expertise helping, setting up stores on Amazon and helping sellers on Amazon. It's very hard to set up a store on Amazon and make it profitable and make it successful. I think, the next session, we should turn our attention to the Amazon Ninja spokes. You're an Amazon Ninja, an Amazon seller ninja, and you have some great spokes there about how to make $1 million using that skill. I know it's not as much overlapping with your interests, but you have a lot of expertise and clearly there's some interest. So next time we should look at that.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what's paying the bills now. And it's already generating income, and I've gotten really good at it, and I've helped some brands really grow and reach a lot more customers. So, I mean, it does make sense to do more with that for sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about that next time. And like some of these things are, like you could think even the ideas that you have here on your idea list about this book, 100 unique ideas to create your Amazon seller store, or a course on setting up a highly profitable Amazon seller store. And I could talk to you about how to market such a course, because there's very specific techniques.
Yeah. One of my clients, he asked me how to do something on Amazon. This was like after our first call. And I just recorded a quick video, a screencast of my computer, and just walked him through it. And I emailed it over. He goes, "You need to do an Amazon course. This is so good. And you just made it so easy to understand." And to me, it was like, I do that every day. It was easy. It was common sense. It didn't even feel like it was anything special, but it really helped him out.
Yeah. So that's, your customers are telling you what they want, right?
Yeah.
So he just told you something he's willing to pay for. He's willing to pay for this. So, so if he's willing to pay for it, how many other people are willing to pay for it, and how much are they willing to pay? Well, the good thing about a course on an Amazon seller store is it's much easier to price high, because people are going to set up a store. They want to make $1 million. So you could easily charge $2,000 for a course on this. So, and also you could divide it up. Like, here's a course on to decide how do you find what product to sell. Here's a course on setting up your Amazon seller store. Here's a course on how to market from your Amazon seller store.
Yeah.
And so well,
there's a lot of brands out there that are not on Amazon, or they're not doing a very good job on Amazon right now. And maybe they're a little too small to hire someone like me to just take it all over. But I could design a course that would teach them a lot of the things that I do. And so then they could grow, and then they could afford to hire an agency to take over. Like if you're only making $5,000 a month on Amazon, it's going to be hard to hire someone like me. But you could grow to where you're doing $50,000 to $100,000 and then have the money to bring in a professional.
So let's look at the statistics. How big is your audience? So how many Amazon sellers are there?
Millions.
There are 9.7 million sellers as of March 2021 on Amazon. Just in the past year, they added 1,029,000 sellers. So, and I would bet you 99% of those are not successful and would love to be successful. So that's your initial market for a course, and you're an expert. So by the way, people who want to compete with you, let them compete with you. They're not going to be as good as you. You're a super expert on this. And it won't be hard for you to make a course, particularly if you videotape your conversations right now with your clients and turn that into a course. It's the same concept. You just staple that together and reorganize it into a course. And, and this is just one idea on your Amazon Ninja spokes.
And Amazon is they're expanding into countries all over the world. And the seller central platform that the sellers are registering on is pretty similar around the world.
Right. So this is really important. It's going to make money. I think, to be honest, the conspiracy number here is the lowest. I still like all the stuff we've been talking about because it'll build your interview skills. It'll build your credibility. It could be a path to $1 million. But one thing that has to conspire in each case is getting people who have interest in spirituality to give you money. And because money and spirituality are not often used in the same sentence. But people who are trying desperately to make more money in an Amazon sellers program, they have money to buy a course. So that is an entire conspiracy number that's subtracted of the things that have to conspire to make you $1 million. But I would do them simultaneously. I do stand-up comedy. It doesn't make me $1 million, but it's something I love and it has an income stream, just like this podcast does. Doesn't make me $1 million, but it's a very good income stream, this podcast. And it leads to other things. All these things, all opportunities are connected.
Yeah, well, just writing on my blog and reviewing your book led to the conversation we're having right now. So my blog hasn't generated any income, but we're talking right now because of it. So
right, and like even me in 2002 writing an article about stocks led to stand-up comedy in 2017, or led to podcasting in 2013, or whatever. So it's all connected. The other thing I would do, so think about the Amazon stuff, start the book, podcast, YouTube channel, and 100 Unique Ideas for Religious Ministries. I need to put an asterisk on that one as well. I saw you put asterisks on the others. And then start reaching out to the entrepreneurs on your list here, whether it's, you list a lot of good names here. Pick 2 or 3, maybe the easy ones to reach out to and start doing them. And then,
and would you just, I think I already learned I have to scrap that 10, 15 minute idea and just go to where it's more of an open format conversation.
Open format. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Don't put any boundaries on that. And then I would outline, by the next time we talk, whether it's next week or the week after, I would outline a course on how to be an Amazon ninja, an Amazon seller ninja. Just outline the course.
Okay.
It'll take you, it's like the 10 idea list. It'll take you one morning to outline it. First draft of an outline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I was reading Skip the Line at the end, that was one of the notes I wrote. I think you were talking about courses or something. And I was like, I need to make a course for this.
Right. And so you wrote that then, which was a while ago. You haven't made an outline. And part of it is because maybe you had other interests and you're busy with your clients, but it does not take a long time to make an outline, and it gets the juices flowing. You got to make an outline for it.
100%.
And, but yeah, this is great. I love this. And you're going to do great with all this. So I'm looking forward to the next session. Let's see what's going on next week.
And if you release this as a podcast, again, this conversation, if any entrepreneurs would like to be interviewed, they could always reach out to me too.
Great idea. They should go to the Choose Yourself, the James Altucher's Choose Yourself community on Facebook, and find you there, because you're there, and or you should join. But if you're there, then they should reach you there. Or where can they email you if you want to give your email?
JamesQ@Quandahl.com. QUANDAHL.
Excellent.
.com. So JamesQ@Quandahl.com. Yeah, I'd love to interview them.
Was there another James@Quandahl.com that?
Yeah, there was the guy that founded it. I had to take care of him.
Oh, okay, that's funny. Jay, of course, let's release this as a podcast episode. And
do you want to? Would you be interested in hearing one of those interviews I did after we talked?
Yeah, so at least send it to me, and I'll see if I could listen to it.
It's 10 minutes, I think.
Yeah, let's do it.
And I already learned a lot from that. So I need to do more, just full interviews, and I need to put them out in the world. That's what I learned with writing on my blog, is just like hitting publish changed everything versus just like recording and not doing anything with it.
So do that, get started on all these things. Let's talk in 2 weeks, and good luck with all this. And you can reach out to me anytime during the 2 weeks. If you have any questions, just send me an email.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. I'll talk to you guys later.
All right. Thanks.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.